Good morning, guys. Melinda here. Of course, I'm going to start with prayer. This is chapter 11. And then I want to again talk to you about the last video I made about addressing some stuff real quick that I either forgot or, yeah. So I'm going to go ahead and pray. Dear Heavenly Father, I just lift up this, and if there's anybody still watching these, Lord, I just pray that right now you minister to their heart. And Lord, I pray that through my story, which is why I'm doing this, that people would see no matter what they've been through, that there's hope in you. That they will see that at the cross, the ground is level, and there are no first place at the cross, Lord. It's your blood. It cleansed every sinner on this earth of every sin, and it's your resurrection destroyed the power of sin and death, Lord. And I pray that people would see that there's hope in Jesus. Because if my story, my horrible, terrible story, can be used by you, God, and I can be redeemed by the blood of Jesus, then I know that anybody can. Not saying that my story is the worst, because I don't believe that for a minute, Lord. But just wanting people to understand that there's hope. Help me to address the things I have to address, Lord. And Father, people's comfort level, I know, are probably getting challenged. And I completely understand that. But just help me anoint my tongue, please, Father. Let the hearers hear what you want them. We just commit this whole thing to you. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, I'm going to address a couple things that I talked about yesterday. I talked about my living at my grandmother's house, and I had mentioned a person named Dale. And I had said that we had dated at one point, and also that we were friends. Well, that's true. We were friends, then we dated, then we were friends. And he's actually one boy that I dated that I didn't sleep with. When I told you I slept with a lot of different people, there were a few. Even there was a guy in Randy Road who really liked me, took me to CET. Didn't sleep with him either. I wasn't always promiscuous, but I became promiscuous once that door was open through being raped. Once I fell in love with Tony, once I dated my friend who lived with us brother, like the door just kept getting more and more open. And by the time we got to my grandmother's at 16, it had flung wide open. And I didn't have enough dignity and self-respect to care about the consequences of my choices. It was hard for me to imagine that there was a future of anything, because all I knew was the moment of the chaos that we lived in. And like I said, drama is a funny thing, and so is sin. It'll lure you in and make you think that it's what you want, or that it on some levels is exciting or fun, but then you just are left in devastation. The wake of sin is devastation and death and destruction. And that's what was happening to my heart and my mind over this time. But I just want you to know, because I know people are going to be like, why are you being so honest? Well, I'm being honest because if I'm talking about what Jesus redeemed, that my story is a story of redemption, unless you guys know how crappy, how shitty I was, you'll never know what God did for me. And so in order to bring him the glory that he deserves, I have to be as honest as I can about how bad I needed him. One of my favorite things about Jesus is that I need him. And if he knows I need him, then he has no choice but to help me. He created me. He knew my name. He knows the number of hairs on my head. He had no choice, but he has to take care of me. So with that being said, we're going to move on. I told you where we left off that I was going to share this story about driving down to Arizona. I can feel that I need a cup of water, so I'm going to pause it here for a minute, and I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. I had to go get me some water. This is chapter 11. Can you believe it? Yeah, I'm guessing there might be around 20 chapters to this book. The number 25 is coming to mind, but I don't think there'll be that many, hopefully, because these are, like I said, exhausting. But I'm doing it for you, and for God's glory, and for obedience. But Once my mom decided, oh, there's a couple more things I want to talk to you about. My mom. Remember I told you that, you know, she used to take us camping and stuff like that? Well, one of the, I want to just start it off with silly. It's not really funny, but at the time it was. One of the times we went camping, or we were out at Rock Cut State Park for 4th of July or whatever. Family members were there and stuff. And her and Lee, my stepdad, get into a fight. And as usual, but I'll start this off kind of funny. This is, there's a watermelon there, and everyone, remember I told you my mom likes to throw things? Well, and she picked up this watermelon, and we're like, not the water. Not the watermelon. Not the watermelon. And she hit, knocked me over the head with a watermelon. Broke it in half. And I actually think people still hate the watermelon. Oh my gosh. My mom, she was something else. The other thing that the other thing that was hard, and I apologize for my coughing. I realize I cough a lot through this. Like I said, I have allergies, and from all of this talking and stuff, I get dry throat. So I have to drink a lot of water. By the way, this is a mason jar. I purposely drink out of mason jars. I don't like drinking out of plastic. So when we were poor, we here, my husband and I, when we first got married, it would be like jelly jars and stuff. But eventually we was able to move up to mason jars and drink out of mason jars. So I drink out of mason jars purposely. Plus, I have to take a lot of medication. Well, now it's down. It was up to 6 times a day. Now I only have to take it 3 times a day because I've been weaned off some medicines. So, yep. Filtered water in a mason jar. That's me. One of the times my friend, who I'm about to talk about, who actually goes with us to Arizona, she was dating a guy, and they decided to go to Arizona with us. They decided to leave Rockford, and they followed us down there. I recalled yesterday, after I was done videotaping, one time my mom was out camping, and for some reason, Junior was out there. We were all camping, and Junior was out there. And now why the H he was out there, I don't know. Like I said, he followed us around. So, we're camping, and we are so uncomfortable, my friend and I are so uncomfortable with him being there, that we actually start walking around the campsite, meet some guys, drive off with them, go up to Beloit, which was, because we live close to the Wisconsin border, went to another state, drank, sort of drove around all night, and then by the time they tried to get us back into the park, it was closed. So I had to like go around these closed gates and stuff like that. And I remember when we were there at some point, Junior came in and had, my uncle had only one arm, and at some point tried to undo my friend's clothes, and she had like a scratch mark up her chest from his hook trying to undo her clothes in the middle of the night while she was sleeping. He was a sick bastard. I've forgiven him, but I hate what he's done. I hate what he represents. Hate it. He left. I call the last video dysfunction, what's your junction? Because from the dysfunction of when we were children to the dysfunction of growing into adulthood became a conduit, a junction by which unhealthy behavior manifested itself as we got older because of stuff like my uncle did to us and the stuff my mom exposed us to. And I forgive my mom too, but it was bad. It was so freaking bad, you guys. There's so much I can't talk about. I I just can't do it. And it's just bad and sick and twisted stuff that was done to us as kids, and things we saw. We saw so much. So again, I'm going to remind you, I know you're going to want to get on your soapbox and throw stones at me and my family, and I don't blame you. But even like with my siblings, I understand what they went through, so I understand their behavior. Just like even now looking back, as stupid as I was, I understand why I did what I did. I don't agree with anything that I did. Like when I started stealing when I was 15. Now that, just so you know, that didn't last very long. I actually stopped stealing because I felt convicted over it. I felt like, you know, it was wrong. So I just stopped doing it. But that would come into play later with my mom, and I'll get to that. But we, at this point now, are heading to Arizona, and our friend who used to live with us decided that her and her boyfriend were going to go with us, okay, so we all decided to go to Arizona. My friend and her husband, my mom, my sister Judy, me, my little brother, my little sister. I'm not sure if my brother Paul went at this time, but he would come shortly thereafter. I'm not sure if he came with us or not. I can't recall, or if he stayed up here a little longer and then went down. But eventually he would end up there too. My other sister stayed here because she married the guy, so she stayed here. And then my brother Norm obviously never left. He was still building his family and building his life in Loves Park and Roscoe and Rockton area. And so he obviously didn't go. But the rest of my family went down there. And again, I don't know if, with the exception of my sister and my brother who stayed in Rockford, I don't know if my brother Paul came at that time, but he came shortly after that. But anyway, we're heading down. Now, mind you, this is a long trip from Illinois to Arizona. Long, like 32 hours was the thing. And so as we're going, all kinds of weird stuff started to happen. At one point, this is where it gets hilarious. My mother, oh my goodness, you guys, I love her. Okay, I think we were in Albuquerque at this point, because just all kinds of weird, funky stuff was happening. Just so many weird things were happening when we get to Albuquerque, and I think my friend and her boyfriend got a flat tire. So, and that might have been caused from at some point something happens where they get a flat tire, because they're pulling the U-Haul and my mom's pulling a trailer. So something happens with the tire, I don't know, on their vehicle. So they're pulled over. Well, we're thinking they're behind us, realize they're not, so we pull over, okay, on the highway, like on a freeway, like I think outside of Albuquerque, like freeway, like, 55, 60 mile an hour cars, hundreds of cars going. My mom, because we don't know where they're at and how far back they're at, and they didn't have cell phones back then, and we had to find them, decides to drop, I think she dropped the trailer on the side of the road, and then decides to drive backwards down the highway, on the side of the highway, to find them. Driving backwards on the side of the highway to backtrack to where they might be. Yeah. We were getting honks and yells, and it was like a shit show of stuff that happened. And we're like yelling, trying to get her to stop. She's not listening. It was so absurd, you guys, this trip. I can't even believe we made it safely to Arizona. And I can't even recall all of them. I just remember it was just ridiculous. That's the one thing that sticks out most in my mind is my mom driving backwards down the freeway. trying to find my friend and her boyfriend, because I don't know if they got a flat tire or if the trailer that they were pulling got a flat tire because of the fender had dug into the tire and caused it to smoke, and they had to pull over, and at one point they thought they were following them, and just all this kind of ridiculousness. But anyway, eventually we make it to Arizona. And my stepdad, Lee, had already moved back there because my ex-brother-in-law had stayed there when my sister had split up, excuse me. And so my stepdad, Lee, had gone back down there. And they both live in the same apartment complex, this apartment complex. And so, sure enough, guess who else followed us down there? Junior. Again, followed us. But what was weird, so did my grandmother at one point. She was living they were all living in this apartment complex. My grandmother was there. My uncle was there. My stepdad was already there. My ex-brother-in-law was there. Like, they all had lived. This is where they were living when Pauline had come back up. So they were all there. Now, Pauline had stayed in Loves Park, and Norm had never left Loves Park, but the rest of us went down. And I don't know if, again, my brother, if he was with us then or if he came down shortly after, but at some point he comes down. So we get there, and I'm there, I don't know, maybe 2 weeks. And, excuse me, I'm like, I want out. I want to go back. I hate it here. It was hot. I hated it. I wanted out. I hated Arizona. And so I remember I asked my mom again if she would just take me back to Illinois. And for some reason she does. I remember we had to look at the car to see like if the oil or whatever, I don't know, something. Well, while I'm out there, this guy who had lived upstairs had come out, and he's like, hey, can I help you? And so he checked whatever needed to be checked, and he was very nice, and I was like, thank you very much. And he had met my uncle at some point, and I remember him thinking he was a nice guy or whatever. But anyway, we just got out of Dodge. My mom brought me back up to Illinois. She did not stay. She went back to Arizona, but I ended up staying with my sister Pauline and her new husband. I stayed up here for a while because I just didn't want to go. I didn't want to be there. So I was up here, and I got my first job at, Kentucky Fried Chicken, and was making friends and stuff like that, and trying to follow Jesus, reading God's Word and praying. And eventually this strain, it started to strain me being there. Kind of a cool thing here, though, is my sister had, her new husband had spent a lot of time at Rockford Speedway, and they were racers and stuff, and introduced, like I had been in my first, like race car. They raced me down the street in it, and it was just kind of cool. Like, I really remember loving the smell in the garage because I had learned a little bit about cars when I dated Tony with his 1971 Monte Carlo. So I was like really interested watching them build engines and just the smell, and I loved it. And he eventually got my sister into racing, and she ended up becoming 1984 Woman on Wheels champion. She won. She actually became a really good racer. Like, her name got put on a wall and everything. And I remember they had a thing, some kind of race where you had to go like 500 laps or something. It wasn't like the Indy 500 or something. This was something else, or 200 laps, and they had to have a counter. And I remember, that the guy who was racing was a friend of Pauline's husband, so I like was his counter, and he ended up winning. I also remember him coming on to me a lot, and I didn't like that very much. But a few weeks passed or months passed, and whatever, and then it came for my 18th birthday. Well, they have what's called Winston Nationals, and it falls on my birthday, and everybody like gets trailers and they go out and they actually stay in around the Rockford Speedway and watch the races and stuff. Well, we went out there for my 18th birthday, and that's where I spent my 18th birthday and got schnockered with my sister, and it was actually fun. We had a good time, you know, a lot of fun and stuff like that. But then after that, shortly after that, the strain just became too much, and I ended up going back to Arizona. Went back to Arizona. And okay, I also wanted to add here, my brother Paul, I actually recalled he didn't go with us when we went down there the first time, because I told you I was only down there for a little bit, and then I came back up. My mom brought me back up. She went back to Arizona, and I stayed up here, like I said, and stayed with my sister. But when I went back to Arizona, how I got back to Arizona was my brother Paul. He had gone down there at this point, and I just drove with him, so we went. That's how I ended up back in Arizona. Because I was thinking about it, like, how did I get back down there? And it was my brother Paul. So he didn't go down with us the original trip, when all of us went in the two cars, when my friend and her boyfriend, I called him her husband at one point, but it was just a boyfriend at that time. Eventually would become her husband, but when we went down with that, my brother Paul actually stayed back. So it was my brother Paul, my sister Pauline, and my brother Norm still in the Loves Park area. But when my mom brought me back when I didn't want to stay in Arizona, I'm not sure why she was so willing to bring me back. It's kind of weird. I don't know if she just was coming back for a reason or what. And I just said I wanted to go home or whatever. But yeah, so that's how Paul ended up down there. Is he came back. He brought me down there when he moved from Loves Park after I'd been up here for a while after I turned 18. So with that, moving on. I went back to Arizona, and then my mom was still living in the same apartment with Lee. I think Lee was still there, and he had started like building furniture and stuff like that, and Judy was still there. My little brother and little sister were still there, and at this point, I think like my sister Judy had started building a relationship with my sister Pauline's ex-husband. They started building a relationship because I think she was like originally one of the people who had dated him first, and then Joanne, and then Pauline, and now it was Judy, or it was Joanne, then Pauline, and now it was Judy. I don't know. I told you they sort of dated the same people. And he would end up dating all of my sisters except me, because nope. And but it was during this time, it was I had gone back, and I don't know, like maybe a month and a half after I'd gone back, I remember I was sitting outside. We had made friends with some of the kids that were there, and we used to go to a mountain, which is like near Arizona State. We would climb the mountain, and there were different things that we would do. And my cousin Greg came to visit us while we were down there, and I remember just enjoying it. Like, even though I was 18, I was kind of being a kid. Well, this guy that had helped me with the car, do you remember I told you the guy came out and checked it? He would like walk past me and go up the stairs, walk past me, go up the stairs. He lived upstairs. And I remember my sister talking about how cute he was and stuff like that. My sister, Judy, I don't know, maybe my ex-brother-in-law was dealing drugs at this point. I don't know. But at some point, I got a hold of speed again, or wanted speed. And she had told me that the guy upstairs sold it. And I went up there, and like, that's how we officially met. Like, he sold me, I don't know, some Black Beauties or whatever, sold me some speed. So that was kind of that. But then it got, I don't know, it was near my sister's Judy's birthday. And the guy upstairs had come, and like they were talking or something, and he had asked me to go for a ride. And I was like, immediately, no. And he was already intoxicated, I think, at that point anyway. And my sister, Judy, I came in the house, I said no. And my sister, Judy, like followed me in, and she's like, just go out with him, go out with him. And I said, well, if I die, it's your fault. And she said, if you have a good time, you might die. Because at this point, even as promiscuous as I was when we lived at my grandma's house, I was as isolated. I was just like polar opposite. Once we moved to Arizona, just sort of whatever that promiscuous thing I was in, I was not in it. Right now, I was just like very isolated. I had insulated myself away from everybody, though I was still doing speed. And I was sort of this girl caught between a child and a woman, because now that I was 18, I just didn't want to be around adults, and sort of hung out with the kids, played outside and different things, which is weird, you guys. It's just weird. And I remember this little boy, you know, I felt the need to protect him because I started to get really... Remember I said I had made a vow that I would not be around kids? Well, when we had lived in my grandmother's house, I forgot a couple things. One of the time when Lee had left, my mom had started dating this guy named Roger, and he actually was a nice guy and nice family and stuff. And then my sister Judy had started dating this guy, and he had a little boy, and I used to babysit his little boy for him, and I would read to him Fox and Socks every time. And being around my nieces, like I had started to develop a compassion and a love for children again, and a need to protect them. So that vow I had made to never love children sort of went out the window. Even though like I would be in devastating pain every time Mother's Day came around, or every time his birthday came around, which was 2 days after my birthday. You know, I still struggle mentally with a lot of that. I was allowing myself to love kids and protect them and encourage and empower and equip them. And I just sort of started doing that. I remember this one kid, his mom was gone, and it was just his dad. And I just remember he would be over and all the time, and I would try to encourage him. And at one point his dad like propositioned me to move in with them and take care of his son. And I was like, no. Like, it was just weird. Everything always had to turn weird. You know what I mean? Well, I had gone out on this date, back to the story, but I had gone out on this date that night with the guy that lived upstairs. And he was nothing but nice to me. He took me to Camelback Mountain, and he showed me the view, and it was beautiful, and he was kind, and he brought me home, and there was like nothing. He was very nice. Like, it was a very nice date. And I know he had a friend, a girl that was a friend. He was really close to her and stuff like that. He was Italian, and she was Italian, and they were good friends and that. And, I, at some point or another, it was around this time, because my mom was still drinking, but we had like gone on a couple of dates or something. We were, or we had gone on that date, and then he wanted to like cook me dinner. Well, my sister Judy had asked me to babysit my nephew, because she was now living with my sister's ex-husband. They were living in a different place. They were no longer in apartments. They had moved away to a house. And I was supposed to go out on a date with him. Well, you remember that note thing that I did before? I did that again, tucked it in his door, and went and babysat my nephew. Well, while I was there, the door knocked, and I opened the door, and it was him. He had brought dinner to me. He was going to take me out to dinner. He had brought dinner to me, and it was like a lobster and broccoli, and he was a lot older than me. I was 18, he was 26. Like, he was older than me, but it was a lovely dinner, and he was kind, and it was great. And so that sort of started us dating. And again, he was a lot older than me, and I told you I went through a really bad promiscuous time when I was 16, 17, but at 18, I didn't want to be that person anymore. But he was a lot older than me and started to pressure me about what men need. And I remember he was going to break up with me if I didn't. So I did. And he bought me flowers, and it was sweet and everything, but I still did it out of obligation because I didn't want to lose him. It still was dysfunction. And anyway, so we had dated, and like for Christmas, he had made me this really cool thing. And I think I gave it to my kids because it's actually really cool. I wish I would have kept it. But he had designed this thing, and it was made out of copper, and you spun it. And when you spun it, it said, "I love you." And he was on a gold chain, and it was a beautiful gift. Like, it was very thoughtful, and he had got me a watch. Like, he had spent money on me and thought, and it was very gracious. Well, during this time, my mom's drinking was bad, and of course her bingo playing. And one time, because I was still living with her and dating, I was still living with her and dating the guy upstairs. One day, and I can't remember, but I think this came first. They may be flopped, but I'm going to go ahead and tell you one story, and then I'll continue on with the other two and why. But in Arizona, it's, in the wintertime and stuff, you can just leave the door open because it's not, super cold or whatever. But one day my mom got drunk, and the guy I had been dating had come home, and he had walked past our door. And when he walked past our door, my mom's like, "You," and she just cusses him a blue streak up one side and down the other. And he goes upstairs, and he shuts the door. And my mom, slammed the door and stuff, and I looked at her, and I said, "I'm done. I'm done." And I walked up the stairs, and moved in with him, and I never went back to my mom's. Lived with her as far as that goes. And I remember my brother, he had gone upstairs and tried to talk, the guy I was dating into forgiving our mom. And he was like, "She's not going to talk to me like that." And she had even gone up there and tried to apologize. And he shut the door in her face and was like, "Get away from me." And it was the first time that I saw somebody not tolerate my mom's abuse. And so that was trippy to me. Well, during this time, my grandmother, I don't know what happened, but she ends up leaving. She ends up going back. Don't know if she went to Illinois. Don't know if she went to Indiana. Not sure where she went, but my uncle didn't leave. And I forgot to mention, by this time, he is remarried. He had married this woman a few years prior. So he's there with his wife. And I don't know if his wife had not been down there at this point, or she was coming down there. But one day I was at my mom's, and I don't know if this happened after I moved out or if this happened before I moved out. But we were there at the house. It was close to Christmas time, and my uncle had come in. And he walked in, and I don't know. I don't know if... I suspect that I probably moved out at this point, because at this point I felt no fear to say what I had to say. Like every other time, I feared my mom kicking me out because she would protect him. But at this point, it didn't matter. I just didn't care. And I told him to get the F out of our house. And he's like, "F you." I said, "You're nothing but an effing child molester, you SOB. Get the F out of this house." But when I said SOB, he raised his arm to hit me. He was going to backhand me because, like I told you, he only had one arm. And he raised his hand because he was going to backhand me with his fist. And I stepped forward, and I said, "Go ahead, I dare you. Because if you hit me, you're going to have to kill me to stop me." And he put his arm down. I had stood up to him for the first time in my life. I was 18 years old. And he put his arm down. And I don't know if he left or if I left. I don't know. But that was the beginning of the confrontation. And then I think I had already moved out because I went upstairs to tell my boyfriend what happened, and he was like, he's such a nice guy. I'm like, no, he's not. And then I told him everything that we had been through. You know, he thought he was a nice guy, and I'm like, no, he's a child molester. Okay, that would not be the last confrontation I had with him. Hey guys, it's me. Sorry to interrupt. There's something I wanted to tell you I forgot. When I had confronted my uncle, he had come in my mom's house, and I said, get the F out. I might have even said, nobody wants you here or something like that, get out. And I said, you're nothing but an, because he tried to tell me that it wasn't my house, and I said, I don't care, get the F out. And I said, you're nothing but a child molester. And he said, you liked it, didn't you? And that's when I said, F you, you SOB. And he raised his hand to hit me. And I said, go ahead, I dare you, because you're going to have to kill me to stop me. And the reality is, they'll try to do that. Child molesters will try to, predators will try to blame you, try to tell you you liked it, try to tell you asked for it, try to tell you caused it. And I'm here to tell you it's all a lie. It's a lie the enemy uses. It's a lie predators use, like you did something to ask for it. Or they were entitled to whatever they did to you, and it's all not true. So I just wanted to interject that in there, because after I was done, I could feel that I was sort of, again, scattered, trying to rush through it, because it sometimes gets too difficult to deal with. So I rush through and skip over some details, and then I remember them later. That was one of the ones that I just wanted to let you guys know, in case there's somebody out there feeling like they're causing what's happening to them, and it's just simply not true. If you're a child, it is the adult's responsibility to protect you and take care of you, and it's not your fault. It's not your fault. That's all. We'll continue with this story. I'm dealing with my mom. There would be one other one, actually a couple more. One with my mom and one with my sister. Which that one I may not talk about, because it's not my story to tell, but it affected me. And I went to her, and I could see what he was doing to my little sister, because he had manipulated her. Like he was going down the line, and now it was her turn, because he had gone through everybody else. And I tried to warn her, but there would be several times in my life I would try to warn people, and people just didn't listen to me, and they would end up getting wounded. And I will tell you later about a story about how my uncle was finally stopped. And you're gonna flip out when you hear the story, how much it came round circle. But in this moment, I don't know, I had gone downstairs in my mom's or whatever, and my mom wasn't there. She had been drinking, and she went to my uncle's. She was over at my uncle's apartment. Well, me being me, feeling like it was my job to protect everybody, why, I don't know. I go over there to get her. And, like, I go to the thing, and I, like, pound on the door, like, Mom, trying to get her out of there, because I know what's going to happen. I know what he's going to do. You know, I know. So, the door opens, and when I walk in, I see my mom. I'm like, Mom, let's go. And then I hear click, and I spin around, and it's my uncle. He was behind the door, and when I walked in, he shut the door and locked it. Well, when I spun around and saw him, I'm like, you son of a bitch, get the out of my way. Move now. And at me saying that, my mom came up from behind, grabbed my arms, and sort of like wrapped her arms around him and pulled my arms back. Now, even though I was still struggling with the anorexia and stuff, and I was thin, I was not super, like my mom was super thin from, you know, she was losing weight from having emphysema, and she smoked and she drank, and so I was a lot strong. I was 18 years old. I was a lot stronger than her, and so I like wriggle out of it, and I turn around and I'm like, F you, I'm done. I spin back around. I'm like, you can stay here. I spin back around, and I'm like, get out of my way. And he moved. I unlocked that door. I walked out, and that was it. I never tried to rescue my mom again. Never did. There would come later that I tried to rescue my little sister, because At some point, I don't think his wife had come down yet, but his wife at some point came down, and like some sick and twisted crap happened with my little sister, and I tried to warn her and nobody would listen, and it was sort of like, I'm done. So that was sort of it. My mom had moved. She ended up moving into a house, and after I moved out, the guy I was dating, even though he could be sweet and tender and he took care of me, and I was working at that point at Salvation Army, and so was my stepdad, actually. That's how I got the job, and I would bike to work and stuff like that. But at some point, my boyfriend decides that his friend, the friend I told you that had that died in the motorcycle accident going to get food for his daughter, his friend had come to visit. And when he had come to visit, his friend was like, I think he might have been smoking crack at this point, but it was cocaine. Because my sister, Judy, and the guy my ex-brother-in-law, like, they were dealing crystal meth at this point. And my sister, when I had gone over to babysit, my nephew, had told me, she's like, you need to try this stuff, you need to try this stuff, you need to try this stuff. And she's like, pressure me. I try crystal meth, and I get addicted to crystal meth very quickly. But I just snorted it. Well, when this guy came to visit, like, he, made, like, trucking be the greatest thing in the world. And not that it's not for some people, but, and, like, my little brother thought he was, like, the coolest thing. And, he was a really nice guy, but he had come to visit, and I remember he was smoking, and he was trying to get me to try it. And I was like, no, like, I never smoked anything but pot. Once in a great while, at this point, I didn't smoke any more pot. Like, I experimented when I was in 8th grade, and then I did a couple times when I was 16 or 17. Apart from that, never touched the stuff again, because I just didn't like it. And he's trying to get me to smoke it, and I'm like, no. Like, I'm gritting my teeth, because, again, remember I said I don't like being pressured or obligation. And I remember my boyfriend at times, like, back off. She doesn't want it. And at this time, my boyfriend still had a roommate who was getting ready to move out to live with his girlfriend when I moved in. Well, my boyfriend also had a cousin, and her boyfriend, they were dealers. My sister and her boyfriend, my ex-brother-in-law, were dealers. So we're surrounded by people who are dealing in crystal meth, okay? So either way, we were getting it from both sides. And we started doing it. Between speed and crystal meth, it was bad. I got really thin. And I was anorexic on top of it. And I was smoking cigarettes. I didn't drink a whole lot at this point. I just liked the crystal meth. And then I found out I was pregnant and immediately stopped. I stopped smoking. I stopped, crystal meth. I just stopped. Okay, guys, I also want you to know, when I say smoking, my boyfriend at the time's friend, he was smoking either crack, coke, or crystal meth, I'm not sure, and he was trying to force me to do it. But I never smoked anything except for trying pot for a few times, which I said that in the video. But when I said I quit smoking, I meant smoking cigarettes, because I never smoked anything but cigarettes or tried pot a few times, in Florida when I was in 8th grade, and then a couple times when I was 16, 17. But I never smoked crystal meth or cocaine or crack or any of that. I never did that. Just like my sister Judy never did. We snorted it, and my sister Judy never IV drug used, and neither did I. My sister Joanne did, but we didn't. So I just kind of want to make that clear because I realize as I review this and edit it, I don't always explain myself well. So when I say I quit smoking. When I found out I was pregnant, I quit smoking cigarettes and quit doing speed and crystal meth, snorting crystal meth. So that's all. On with the story. And I went to a doctor and he diagnosed me pregnant because my boyfriend's cousin worked at this doctor's office. Now, I'm going to tell you his name, and don't laugh, but he was a lovely man. His name was Dr. Bush, and he was an OBGYN. And yes, I know, people laughed at me and made fun. Nice guy, though. Really lovely man. Took good care of me. But we found out I was pregnant, and then my boyfriend and I didn't talk for 2 weeks. We just were deciding what I was going to do. And we had come back together to talk, and he said, and I don't want to share his story, but he had said that he wanted me to keep it, and I said I was going to. I had no intention of doing anything else. It was whether he was going to stay involved or not was really the issue. Well, when I told my mom, I remember her coming to Salvation Army. I told her I was pregnant, and her first words out of her mouth is, "Are you going to give this one away too?" First words out of her mouth. And I said, "No, I'm keeping it." And so with that, I continued to work at Salvation Army and live with my boyfriend and ride my bike to work. There was one time I fell, actually, into the road. It was not a good thing. But, and then at some point, I went to lift a hide to bed. I was around 4 months pregnant, and I hurt my back. And so it started to make it difficult to work. And so once I found out I was pregnant, then my boyfriend at the time decided that he wanted to go on the road in the semi and do the semi thing. So he leaves and goes to the Midwest somewhere and starts training to be a semi driver, which leaves me pregnant and alone in this upstairs apartment. Well, when you start a semi business, there's a lot of overhead, and you have to, through the company, you have to have like an accountant and stuff like that. And so the accountant does it, and on paper it looks like he's making money, but he's spending all that money for upkeep or for gas or whatever. So there was nothing coming home. So he's on the road in the semi, and like I said, there's a lot of overhead, so there wasn't money coming in. So like I wouldn't run the air, and this is summertime, I wouldn't run the air. I mean, it'd be 100, the thing, that would be buried because it would be so hot in there. And I would run the fans thinking that somehow would make the electric bill less, but it would just blow out hot air. So a lot of times I would just go and swim laps in the pool, which was basically hot water, in order to try and cool off. And at this point, we were so broke that there was no food in the house. And my mom was stealing food for me. She would bring food over, but see, I was also anorexic, so I wasn't eating anyway. So I'm pregnant, alone, anorexic, in an upstairs apartment, can't afford to run the air in the middle of the summer while my baby daddy was on the road in the semi trying to earn a living. It was not a good scene. It was not a good scene for me. And I remember my mom was stealing at this point. Because like I said, I had stopped stealing. It was just a phase. These were phases I went through. I was good at going through a phase. But, and I had stopped because before I was pregnant, I told you my sister had introduced me to crystal meth, and I had stopped while I was pregnant. And so, but I would still, sometimes I would go over to her house and do laundry, or sometimes I would go over to my mom's to do laundry because we couldn't afford even to do laundry at this point. And so, but I was still, this is weird, we lived upstairs. I would still go down the stairs across this giant parking lot to get to do laundry, to carry it back across and upstairs. I was even doing my brother's laundry. Okay, it's me again. When I say that my mom was stealing at this point, she wasn't just stealing food for me. She was stealing a lot of stuff. Like they would steal stuff from the store and then take it back and return it, because you could do that back then. And I remember she stole like tons and tons of brass, like brass swan and all kinds of brass stuff, like, and decorated her house. And she was like compulsively stealing. And they would steal, sometimes they would steal other stuff and just take it back for money. So when I say my mom was stealing, I mean she wasn't just stealing food, she was stealing a lot. And I tell you, like, we couldn't afford laundry. So I would go, sometimes I would go to my sister's and do laundry. Sometimes I would go to my mom's and do laundry. And sometimes I would even be doing my brother's laundry. Why, I'm not sure, but I did. I would end up doing my brother's laundry too. Um, and, but one of the times, I forgot to tell this story because this is quite interesting. One of the times that I was doing laundry, I remember coming down the stairs, and when I walk across, you had to walk across this big parking lot into where the laundry was. I remember as I was walking, I noticed, I started noticing that there were police. There was like one on the roof, and there was one by the bottom of the stairs. And when I walked across the thing, I went into the laundry room, and there was one in there. And apparently, and then when I go back, they tell me not to go through the parking lot, to go around, because apparently there was a guy who was holding someone hostage in our apartment complex. And they were stationed, like they had snipers stationed and everything. And so I didn't realize the seriousness of the situation, but there was all kinds of like weird stuff that would happen like that. Like, there was one guy who got in a fight with another guy when the police came, because when he punched him, the guy fell back and hit like a yellow, one of those bumper things that you park your car. The back of his head hit it, and it hit it in just such a way that it killed him, like on the spot. And the police were there for that. And there's a lot of weird little nuances like that that happen. Yeah, there was all kinds of weird stuff that would happen. I mean, someone stole my boyfriend's motorcycle at one point, and then one time when I was doing laundry there, because like I said, we couldn't afford laundry at points, but there were times that we did do laundry there when I was pregnant. It just, it depended on what was getting sent home. But I would do a lot of laundry at my sister's or at my mom's. But the times that I did do laundry in this apartment complex, weird stuff seemed to happen. And one of the times I went and I accidentally opened up a different wrong dryer. And when I opened up the dryer, I noticed, I was confused because I saw something that was mine in the dryer, and I pull it out, but the rest of the stuff wasn't mine. And so I figured out that someone had stole something that was mine, and I accidentally opened up the dryer that it was in to find out that they stole it. So I waited for them to get there. And remember I said, when I'm not really a fighter unless I'm confronting you on something. Well, I wait till this girl comes and I confront her, like on the spot, confront her about stealing and stuff. And which at this point, I look back and think could have been dangerous, because like I said, there was a lot of weird stuff that happened in that apartment complex, and you never knew who you were dealing with. Yeah. So I know that it seems sort of scattered, and again, I'm leaving out a lot of the nuances of what it was like to, like, constantly be around people who were high and or selling drugs. And I mean, we even had a scale in our house. I remember them going door to door looking for that guy who hit the guy who died. And I remember my boyfriend, I'm hiding a scale in the ceiling, because yeah, it was just there. The stuff was there. And it was pretty bad. And I also remember, like, because I told you I really hated Arizona. I remember the sandstorms that would come and the sky would turn orange, and it felt like the world was ending. And but it was just a really difficult. It was difficult to be alone and pregnant, because again, those feelings of rejection came, and fear, and just angst all the time, worrying, wondering, and again, my mom was just being as kind as she knew how by stealing food for me. Like, she was trying to help me in the only way she knew how. I mean, she didn't have any money either. And so, and it was nobody's fault but mine for the situation that I had found myself in. So I don't want it to come across that I want some kind of pity here, because I don't. Remember, I told you that I would start making bad decisions. Well, this was my fault. I put myself in this position, you know, and the abuse that I suffered, I won't, that's not my fault, but the consequences of my choices are my fault, because it's things that I chose that put me in those positions to have to deal with it. So being alone and pregnant in a apartment that we couldn't afford to run the errand with no food, and me being anorexic was my fault, you know? And so I just want to put that out there, because I don't want people to think that I have a victim mentality or woe is me, because I don't. Again, I've told you guys I know how the story ends. This is just part of the journey. It's just part of the journey. And even my boyfriend at the time really was doing what he thought was best for us, even though it did not turn out what was best for us. At the point, he was just doing what he thought was best. And I have to tell you, we're going to make decisions that aren't the best. And we're going to make selfish decisions, as you'll find out. Especially, I made a lot of selfish decisions. And my children's dad really did try to take care. The one thing he did was always try to provide for us. But there was a lot of dysfunction that went outside of that. And so you'll find out more about that as the story goes. But again, the things that I suffered as a kid would come back to haunt me. I tried, you'll find out how desperately hard I try to protect my children from the things that I suffered. But I also overshared and was too honest. And you'll find all these nuances about what it was like to be a mom at 18 and still have not dealt with my past. It will affect how I mother. I have great relationships with my kids now, but there will be times where I don't. They're not the greatest, And every time I felt like I was done with my mom, somehow or another, she would always end up coming back in my life. But there will be a point where something happens and it's sort of done. And I will only see her 3 times after that. And because there were several times I said I was done. Each time I thought I was done. But, again, she was my mom and I loved her and wanted her to be a part of my life. But then something would happen and she couldn't be. And so, but we'll get to that. I don't want to jump too far ahead. So I just wanted to share that interjection again. So on with the story. He goes on the road in the semi, and I'm pregnant, and which leaves me alone. And I had stopped working at this point and have insurance on our car, like all kinds of stuff. Okay, and this now is summertime, and I'm getting more and more pregnant. And while he was gone, after he had gotten done with his training, he had decided to fly me out to where he was at, and I went on his very first road trip, but I was pregnant, and so I don't know, I was like 4 or 5 months pregnant. But when we go on this road trip and stuff, like we went through, it's called the Rim in Arizona, and like even professional truckers didn't go through there, and we did. And I remember being petrified because the road was so narrow, and the mountain is here, and his trailer is like, because the road is so narrow, it's tilting, and it looks like it's like kissing the mountain. It was so incredibly scary. I prayed all the way down, begging God not to let us die, and we didn't. It was by God's grace we didn't, Because later when he told semi-drivers that he had less than 1,000 miles under his belt, they're like, and you went through the rim? What's the matter with you? You know, but I remember I was scared when I flew there. I remember being scared because I was afraid of planes. I've only been on a plane 7 times, I can tell you each time. And at this point, like, anxiety is building bad inside my spirit. Like, I'm starting to get afraid of things and severely anxious. But I remember traveling cross country in the semi, being pregnant, and I remember every time he would go over a bump, it was like ripping across my stomach, and it would hurt because he didn't have air seats. So it was like he had an air seat, but I didn't, and it was really difficult. And we had traveled, like, we went, you know, from the Midwest, we went to California, and like, eventually into Arizona and back home and stuff, and through the rim and everything. But one place we had stopped, and we had gone to visit friends. We had stopped to see his friends who lived in Flagstaff. And even though I was, you know, maybe 4 months pregnant, I wore really baggy pregnant clothes. And I was anorexic, so I wasn't gaining a lot of weight. And people are like, wow, you're big. And then I would lift my shirt up, and they're like, oh my gosh, there's just a tiny little belly there. What are you wearing these? But my hips had widened, so it bothered me to wear clothes. Because my kids are built the same way. Well, two of my girls. I had a wide waist, but I had super small hips and skinny legs. And my hips had widened, so I didn't like to wear clothes because a lot of my clothes were slims because I had the wide waist and small hips and small legs. Well, we stopped at this restaurant in California and stuff, and I remember somebody saying, and I never forgot this, you guys, I remember somebody saying, oh my gosh, are you having twins? And I jokingly said, well, if I do, I'm sending one back, as a joke. Well, I'm about to tell you what happened later, a few months later, and I regretted saying that. It came back to me, and I was just like, wow, I can't believe it. Okay, so we're about to get into a really emotional, it's actually a sweet story, and I want to give it the respect due it, but in order to do that, I have to pee. So I know I'm sort of a little bit, but this is getting into territory that's really, you know, tender and affects me even today. Not that the rest of the stuff didn't, but this is connects to my life now. So with that, I'll be right back. I'm going to go pee. Okay, I'm back. I'm going to do a quick recap just so, because I know I can be all over the place. Told you the drama that happened with me living with my mom. I had moved out with my boyfriend who lived upstairs. During this time, I got addicted to crystal meth, whether it be being exposed through his side of the family, his cousin and future cousin-in-law, or if it was through my side of the family, my oldest sister, and my ex-brother-in-law. We were being exposed to a lot of drugs. But I ended up pregnant. He goes on the road in the semi. I don't do any drugs. All the money goes in sustaining him, but which left me like pregnant, hot, and hungry. And my mom had to, you know, would steal food, or I would go to her house to get air conditioning because it would be so hot in our apartment or whatever, go to my sister or my mom's to do laundry. And my mom's drinking had slowed way down at this point. My mom's emphysema was getting worse and worse, so she was getting sicker and sicker. But, so my husband, or my boyfriend at the time, goes to the training for the semi, flies me out there. I actually go on his first road trip. We go through the rim, which was super dangerous, super scared, caused a lot of anxiety. You know, people saw me pregnant and thought I was, you know, bigger than I was until I lift up my clothes and they'd see how small I was. And then I told you that during this trip, we had gone through California and someone had said, wow, you look like you're having twins. And I jokingly said, well, if I do, I'm sending one back. Okay, I told you all that. Well, after he does his, first road trip and stuff, I stay home and he goes on the road. And I stay home, obviously, because at this point, like I said, I'm 4 or 5 months pregnant. And it's really hard in the semi, a lot of back pain. So I stay home. Well, I'm by myself. And so I spent a lot of time going over to my mom's to get, like I said, to get air conditioning, and my sister's. And there was this guy that was there and his wife. And I remember this guy also was a drug dealer, and he was super nice to me. But he would come into play later in our lives in a weird sort of way. But it was sort of a blur those few months. I just know I spent a lot of time swimming or with the fan on, and it was hot, and, doing laundry, whatever. Well, going to the doctor, and this is the same doctor that diagnosed me pregnant. Well, he normally did ultrasounds, but we were poor and we couldn't afford an ultrasound. Plus, I was on the road in the semi at the time that he was supposed to do the ultrasound. So months pass, and at this point, I think I gained 23 pounds total. And he goes in and, he measures me, and he's like, wow, you jumped 3 centimeters. And he checks me and he's like, wow, you're dilated at 3. And I'm like, okay, well, I still had 6 weeks to go. And so I remember it was really hard to get a hold of my boyfriend because it had to go through dispatch to get to him. And so, but he had called me, he would call me regularly, and I told him hey, I'm dilated at 3. And I would go on Thursdays. That was my appointment. I'm dilated at 3. It could be 2 weeks. I just want you to know. And he's like, okay. So this was a Thursday. And then 3 days later, on Sunday, and I have to tell you, when the doctor would check the heartbeat, I kept telling him, I think this baby's going to break my rib, because I was always saying how my one rib was always hurting because it was getting stretched out from the baby. And he's like, it won't break your rib, it's fine. And then when he would do the baby's heartbeat, he would be at the bottom of my stomach, and then 2 seconds later he'd be at the top. And I'm like, wow, that's really far. And he's like, yeah, they can flip in 2 seconds. Well, he was wrong, and we'll find out why. 3 days after I had called or talked to him about, being dilated at 3 or whatever, and that it could be weeks or not, I wake up in the middle of the night and I'm in pain, and I go to the bathroom and I wipe and there's blood. Now, if you remember with my son, the same thing happened. I wipe and there's blood. With my son, I woke up around, midnight, went back to bed, got up at 4 o'clock in the morning. This time, again, around the same time, midnight, I wake up, I wipe, there's blood. I'm like, okay, having experienced this already with my son, I'm like, all right, well, I'm going to go ahead and take a shower. So I take a shower and I immediately try getting a hold of my boyfriend at the time, baby daddy, trying to get a hold of him, going through dispatch, trying to get a hold of him, because we had an idea where he was. He was in Texas, and we knew he was going north, so we at least knew the location, and we knew where he was heading to. So we were trying to get a hold of him, to tell him that I'm in labor. At some point, his cousins, because he had 2 cousins, his cousins take over, and they start trying to get a hold of him for me, because now at this point, the labor's getting hard. And so I drive over to my mom's, who lived in a trailer park at this point, because she had moved out of the house, and my sister Judy ended up moving into the house, but she moved out into a trailer park. And so she's at the trailer park, and I drive over to tell her, hey, I'm in labor. So my mom drives back to me at my house, and I'm like, get a hold of the dad, get a hold of the dad. And I finally decide, the labor gets so bad, and we're only literally 5 minutes from the hospital. I decide, okay, it's time. And I get to the hospital, literally we're in the parking lot. It's about 5:30 in the morning. and I go to get out, and I get such a bad labor pain that I actually have to stop, like, and breathe through it. I think at this point I figured out to breathe through it. We get into the hospital and stuff. My little sister was there, my mom and my little sister. My little sister had asked, can I be in there? And I said, no, in case something happens. And I said that to her. Well, then it was me and my mom went back there, and I'm laying on my side, and I just remember call, trying to get a hold of their dad. Just call. Well, they take me in, they lay me on my back and stuff, and it's my doctor who diagnosed me pregnant, and it was 5:30 when I got there. Well, this is 5:55 at this point. And it was like maybe 5:20 when I got there. 5:30 by the time I got in there, somewhere 5:35, and they took me in right away. And I'm laying on my back, and I have a daughter. And so I'm laying on my back, and I'm like, okay, waiting for them to give her to me. And my mom's like in her scrubs with the thing and stuff. Well, they don't give her to me. Suddenly I see like half a dozen nurses running all over the place. And I'm like, what's going on? And I can tell that I'm starting to feel funny, but I don't know why. And the doctor says, do you need to push? And I said, no. And he's like, okay, listen to me. You have twins. There's another one in there. She's a transverse lie. We're going to do a episiotomy, try to get her out. If we can't, we're going to do an immediate emergency C-section. Do you understand what I'm saying? And I'm like, okay, because what am I going to say? Let me up? I said, okay. And then at that point, the doctor had gotten up to do something. And the nurse goes, doctor, look. And I was hemorrhaging. I had bled through the bed. I was bleeding all over the floor. And that's it. There's a gurney in there. They pick me up. They throw me on this gurney, and they're running down the hallway. And I remember when they're running, they had turned the corner to get into the operating room. When they turned the corner, they hit it, and it caused me sort of to fling over. And at this point, I'm so weak. I remember being aggravated because they hit that wall, because they went around that corner so fast. But they were trying to get me to an emergency room or into an operating room because I was dying. And so they get me in there, and the doctor's all in his scrubs, and he's like, I'm going to put this mask on you. You're going to count back to 10. And it was like 10, 9, and I was out. Next thing I know, I open my eyes, and my mom is standing there, and she's in the scrub. She's got the thing over her head. And when I open my eyes, she just sort of falls on my chest, and she's sobbing. Excuse me, she's sobbing hysterically. And I was disoriented. I didn't know what had happened. But apparently my daughter, my first daughter was born, because they were already 6 weeks premature. She was born at 5 pounds a half ounce at 5:55. But then my second daughter, I had twins, was born at 6:49, 54 minutes later. And she had been born dead. She was blue. They revived her. She had lost a pint of blood. They flew her to St. Joseph's Hospital in a helicopter, and I had to have a full transfusion. And I was dying. And when I opened my eyes, apparently that meant that I was going to live. And so she had gone through all of this. My mom did, by herself, just watching this happen. And so eventually I was taken to my room, and I remember my brother Norm calling me and congratulating me. I remember my boyfriend's friend, that girl, that Italian friend he had, she came and she was dressed up in a clown outfit and had balloons, and she was just very lovely and sweet. And I remember this little nurse, she came in, and when my people were calling and stuff, and I was so weak at one point I dropped the phone, and she's like, that's it. And she took the phone out, and she's like, no more visitors. I remember nurses coming up from other floors, and I couldn't figure out why. Well, it was because I was an 18-year-old kid who had had one baby natural and one baby C-section, and at that time it was unheard of. And my C-section wasn't a normal C-section, it was an emergency C-section, which means the outside they were up and down, and on the inside they did an upside down T and peeled it back. Because apparently what had happened was when I was having that pain under my rib cage, it was actually one baby. And when he was hearing the heartbeat, he was actually hearing the heartbeat of two different babies. And I had only gained 23 pounds in that day that I had gained those 3 centimeters in like a week or whatever, or 2 weeks, every 2 weeks at that point. It's because there were 2 babies growing. And for being 6 weeks premature, they actually weighed a good size. They were 5 pounds and a half ounce and 4 pounds and 14 ounces, which are pretty good sizes considering they were 6 weeks premature. But I just remember how scared I was because now I had twins and we weren't prepared for twins. Well, this is where the story gets very sweet. I was experiencing all of this. Meantime, my kid's dad was on the road in the semi going north in Texas. And his cousins were trying to get a hold of him, trying to get a hold of him. And we had a name for a girl and we had a name for a boy. And the girl, she was that name, but the boy, we just changed the boy's name and made it feminine, and that ended up being her name. So, like, we knew pretty quickly what their names were going to be. But anyway, he's traveling, and he had picked up a helper, a guy helper, because you could do that. So he was traveling with them and to help move the furniture and stuff, because that's what he hauled, was furniture. And so I would go on the road in the semi and stuff. When I did that, I, took like, had to observe the furniture and took all the marks or whatever. But anyway, so he's traveling, and we know he's between one town and another town. Well, his cousin had the brilliant idea of calling the state troopers. So the state troopers actually start doing this. So they start coming from both directions trying to find his truck, his semi, and he gets pulled over. And I remember later he said, like, he thought like he was getting busted for something, because sometimes with semis, they get pulled over for different things, weight or, not being clean or whatever. So he was concerned about why he was being pulled over. Well, they said, there's been an emergency at home. You need to call home. Well, he knew that meant something with me. So he drives to a truck stop, and he's on the phone, and his cousin tells him, you're the proud father of a little girl. And he like yells, it's a girl. And everybody's like, yay, and then he says, and you're the proud father of another little girl. And he's like, twins? And he starts to cry, and the people like erupt in applause around him. And then he's like, I gotta get home. So these semi drivers make a convoy and convoy him home. It was like, it ended up being, I don't know, it was like a lot of hours. It ended up being like a total of like 22 hours or 20 hours or something straight they drove just to get him home. And so I'm coming in and out of it because I've lost so much blood and I'm so weak. And at one point I'm asleep. Now, mind you, I've never saw my second daughter because she was flown to another hospital. So I've only seen one, and I didn't really get to hold her because I was so weak. So I'm laying there and I'm asleep, and I wake up and he's there in the room, and he's holding our daughter, our firstborn daughter. And then he actually got to go to the hospital and hold her twin, our second daughter, before I did. He got to hold them both before I did because I was so weak from losing all my blood. And the surgery that I had was, because of the way that my stomach was cut open, was more major surgery than it was minor. And so I was in the hospital for 5 days. I remember when it was time to leave the hospital, I was so scared because I just started crying because I told the nurse, like, how am I going to take care of this little baby? And so by this time, they had lost the twins. The younger twin had got to come back to the hospital that we were in, but she was going to have to stay 2 days longer than we could. And so we went home with one of our daughters. And she was 4 pounds and 8 ounces at that time. And her sister, the second born, was 4 pounds, 7 ounces. And we had come home on it because I had told my boyfriend at the time about, the doctor's appointment was on Thursday. 3 days later, on Sunday night, I was in labor. Monday morning, I had them. This was Friday. And so we came home with one twin. Well, we knew that we had, because we just had a bassinet and, one car seat that, was basically, if you look at it, was too big. But at the time, we were just poor and broke. And so we had to scramble. We managed to find a second bassinet, and we went and got a second car seat. And the bedroom, because it was a 2-bedroom, the bedroom still had stuff in it from his old roommate. And we just had the 2 little bassinets in there. That's how it started. I sat on a exercise bench to feed them because I had gone into shock. I wasn't able to feed them. They had to, I had to have the pill to dry up my breast so that I wasn't even able to nurse them or anything. And so we came home on a Friday, and I got to tell you, 2 days later on a Sunday, we brought home our other daughter. And then, I don't know, a week later or 2 weeks later, we had a party and there were people there. And people were drinking and partying, and we wouldn't let anybody smoke around them. They had to smoke and blow their smoke outside or stand outside or whatever. But still, there's a picture of me holding them both for the first time, and I'm petrified because I'm holding these 2 tiny babies. But at this point, their dad and I try really hard to just take care of these babies. He stayed home from the semi for 6 weeks. He stayed home with me to help take care of the kids. And during this time, this is a peculiar, weird thing. But during this time, because the hospital, because we were so poor and stuff, we had gotten dozens and dozens of bottles of formula and water. They were glass bottles of water and already pre-made formula in these glass bottles. And we got a ton of stuff, and thankfully so, because we were broke. And so during this time, he stays home these 6 weeks, and then he has to go back on the semi, and which leaves me alone to take care of these babies. Well, during the 6 weeks, there was supposed to be a nurse that came in. A neonatal nurse is supposed to come and check up on the babies. And so I'm there, and I had just gotten out of the shower, so I had a towel wrapped around me where the kids were hungry. So I was feeding one, burping her, feeding the other, burping her, and someone knocks at the door, and I open the door. I'm come on in, thinking it's a neonatal nurse, because I'm still in a towel. My hair's wet, and I'm feeding them, and she's talking to me, and I'm yeah, mm-hmm. And at this point, each of the kids had gained 2 pounds in 6 weeks. They were maybe even close to 2.5 pounds. They were 6'13" and 6 something else. So they had gained a lot of weight, 2.5 pounds. So they were doing really well. Because people would say how cute they are when they were born. They weren't. It was horrible, because one of them, from getting stuck, she had a black eye and her nose was bent over, and they were so tiny that their skin hung down. And they ended up, once they got some meat to them, they were beautiful. But when they were first born, people would say they're beautiful, and I would think, no, they're not. No, they're not. They're so tiny. No. You could tell that they had been through some stuff. I say all that to say, because when this lady comes and I'm sitting there feeding them in a towel and stuff, she starts asking me questions, but I realize the questions she's asking me don't make sense. And I'm aren't you the neonatal nurse? And she's no, I'm with DCFS. And I'm what? And she's yeah, we were told that you were starving your children. I go, what? And I'm at this point furious. And I'm here's a story. So I go through the whole story and I'm like, here's a doctor's number. You can call the hospital. I'm like, they've each gained 2.5 pounds. You're doing great. What do you mean I'm starving my children? And so we think that it was one of my boyfriend's ex-girlfriends, or it was a neighbor that had called. It could have only been one of those two people. And so, and what's funny is there was a couple down, a gay couple down, and they would like watch over me and take care of me. They were so lovely and sweet, and I realized like the whole, and I get it, but we're not going there. All I know is they were lovely and kind to me. And it was a black guy and a white guy, and he, you know, dressed like a woman, and they were lovely and kind to me. That's all I know, is they were lovely and kind. I don't want to go into anything. I just know they were lovely and kind. And so, but as she's hearing my story, she's like realizing it was a false call. And she's like, I'll investigate everything, but you probably won't be hearing from me again. Thank you. And that was it. She left. And so, but I remember just being invested in trying to be the best mom I could be. But I was alone because their dad had gone back on the road in the semi, and I was alone. And I was scared. And it was really hard. And I'm going to stop here because, again, I'm going to start to get into some areas. Like, at this point, I think I tried to, like, was trying to be a better person and a right person, but again, those feelings of abandonment came. And when those feelings of rejection and abandonment come, I start to seek ways to find comfort, and that's exactly what would happen. So with that, I'm going to end this here, and this is chapter 11. I don't know, I think I might call it, I don't know what I'm going to call it. I'll have to figure that out. So with that, I will see you guys later. Linda out.